Hi, I'm Julia, and I'm here to talk about how teacher-led research can inform school design and industry, sharing findings from Learn's Plans to Pedagogy program. Plans to Pedagogy comes from a need to support school staff as they transition into ILEs and a desire to work collaboratively with schools to develop good use of ILEs over time. By good use, we mean utilising the design features to support practices that enhance student learning and effective teaching. Plans to Pedagogy, or P2P, is designed to be a participatory process for schools, in which each P2P project is designed specifically for the school's context and spatial issues. This could include conceptualising or designing new spaces, supporting transition into ILEs, including expanding teacher pedagogies to maximise the potential of ILE spaces and working to measure the changes to students' experiences as a result. Finally, the program could also include projects that evaluate practices within existing ILEs. The aim of these projects are to help us understand the way school leaders and teachers can effectively engage in the design, development, and use of ILEs. We have a total of 13 schools which have participated in the P2P program of work, spanning both Australia and New Zealand, of which 8 are still working on current projects. We use a rolling recruitment strategy to build a growing network of schools, meaning each school is at a different stage in their own P2P journey, but they're able to access the support of other schools in the program of work, as well as the Learn research team. The Plans to Pedagogy project works with schools at all stages of ILE development, whether they are undertaking new builds, retrofitting existing spaces, or repurposing within an existing classroom structure. In doing so, P2P recognises that every school is different, and to facilitate good design and good practice requires designers and teachers to identify the ILE issues specific to their school. They need to reach an agreement on what types of learning they desire and how the design of these spaces can help that to occur. P2P also recognises that teachers and designers need to play a leading role in collecting evidence to help design, use, and then inhabit long-term those spaces. Within P2P, we are actively bringing together a spatial learning team in each school to do this work, in collaboration with a researcher from our Learn group, and in some cases, an industry partner. Currently, P2P includes 8 schools. MacKillop Catholic College in Northern Queensland is a quickly expanding secondary college. They believe their teachers use its agile learning spaces as well as pedagogic tools to develop an array of learning settings that meet students' individualised needs. In P2P, they want to use evidence to guide future teaching strategies by seeing if this is really the case, and where and how their approaches are having most effect. Hayata Community Campus is a years 1 to 13 school located in Christchurch, New Zealand. It is a PPP build where architects and the actual teaching staff never met. This meant decisions about the design of spaces were done in isolation of the intended teaching practices. In addition, ranking in the lowest possible SES category, the brand new Hayata school faced significant challenges. The staff want to understand how these more innovative spaces can help teachers lift student engagement. Methodist Ladies College in Melbourne enjoys generous budgets and a school cohort at the upper end of scholastic achievement. For them, a new middle school complex was an opportunity to explore how to activate these new learning spaces to generate more dynamic and engaging learning experiences for students. Since 2018, they've been mapping the pedagogic encounters that occur within their classes. These help generate shared understandings about how to use learning spaces to promote student agency, curiosity, critical thinking, creativity, strong relationships, and opportunities for a diversity of achievement. During our P2P program, Newmarket Primary, an inner city school in Auckland, underwent the building of a significant new wing added to an old school. Because staff needed to work across both areas, they wanted to understand how to ensure an equity of advantage. To do so, they wanted to use P2P to gather evidence about how pedagogies change due to the different environments and what impact this was having on children's creative and critical thinking and their collaborative and communicative practices. Henschke Primary School in New South Wales recognised that flexible spaces and pedagogy could be challenging for teachers to adapt to. In a school where budgets restricted major infrastructure projects, they wanted to use the P2P project to understand the specific details of how different team teaching pedagogies within modestly developed flexible learning spaces promoted student engagement. Radford College in the ACT realised that parts of their school were adapting to new ways of organising space and furniture due to them being more flexible and innovative than older school spaces. they wanted to use the P2P project to gather school-focused data on the impact of students' spatial and furniture configurations, the impact that these had on teachers' practices and students' learning. Vass Primary School is an independent public school in the south of Perth. For many years, it's been teaming with a furniture company called Bapata to experiment with the use of innovative furniture designs. With no change to the building infrastructure possible, they've focused on a flexible furniture as a mechanism to support a student-centred inquiry learning approach. Their P2P project wanted to see what impact student and teacher use of furniture had on student engagement, and in the second phase of that work, the qualities of their engagement. Finally, Whitsundays Anglican School in Mackay, Queensland, was embarking on their first major school build project for many years, an updated library and STEM centre. For them, P2P is an opportunity to bring staff along that journey and to use the planning and the use of the resource centre to see if teachers would embrace deep learning as a driver of new pedagogies. Together with our other completed P2P projects, these 8 projects are a good representation of the variety of schools across Australasia. They cover schools that are high and low SES, co-educational and single sex, rural, suburban and inner city, secular and non-secular, government and independent. Importantly, these 8 are also a cross-section of the 3 categories of ILE development we touched on: new builds, retrofits, and repurposing of existing spaces. Today, I'd like to focus on 2 of these projects, one which highlights how P2P can transform practices within a school, and one which demonstrates how the findings from our research can be used beyond a school context. Our first case is from Whitsundays Anglican School in Mackay. This project is about how we can transform practices within a school using research as a process. Whitsundays is a co-designing with the architect's story about how a school is attempting to bring staff on the journey right from the start of a new build. It provides an example of how staff use the writing of educational and design briefs to think about how the building should work and how this work is shaping their transition into the new build. The school is about to start construction on a new build within their existing campus, relocating their library and science buildings into a shared resource, science and design centre. They want to ensure deep learning is happening for students in this space and to support their teachers to transition from current traditional spaces into the more flexible environment. The school started really early. Through workshops before an architect was commissioned, they've developed an educational brief that argued the educational reasons for the new building, how it is assisting the school to achieve its educational vision, and how they wanted it to perform in terms of teaching and learning. For example, Whitsundays Anglican has always been an academic leader in their region. Their vision for this space and as a school was to think about how they can engage a diversity of learners. They wanted to ensure that the new build supported good 21st century learning skills for all of their students. From the educational brief, they've created a design brief which allowed the architects to consider suggestions from the teachers about the broad arrangements of space in the new building. BSPN then worked with a teaching team through several workshops as their plans progressed. Whitsundays staff also ran workshops which provided the opportunity to rethink how subjects were taught in the new space. For example, they wanted spaces where students could be collaborative and which allowed for different communicative practices. The outcome of this thinking is shown in a much more open resource space, with furniture and coloured carpets being used to delineate the junior and senior library resource sections, and a big common reading area and working area in the centre of the ground floor. A forum then connects the 2 floors, and upstairs, as shown on the elevation, there are wide hallways between the science labs, as well as a quieter space which is called the drum, which can be used for collaboration between students or between students and teachers, given its proximity to the staff room. Whitsundays Anglican is still at the start of their journey. With a strong plan and vision in place, we're now working with the school's team to track how teachers and students move from their existing spaces into the new build. Embedded in this transition is their early work. Teachers and librarians working with the school leadership and architects on developing a clear educational practice that fits the emerging design. We're surveying students across years 4 to 12 and surveying, interviewing and observing teachers to explore how their practices change over time as they transition. From a research perspective, this has included designing a protocol of data collection that will provide an accurate picture about the way the new space impacts teaching and learning. It will, in effect, assist future design projects through understanding what works for Whitsundays Anglican by collecting evidence from their practices in existing buildings and once they enter the new build. The second project we'd like to share is VAS, where a well-established and successful program is being examined for evidence of what is working and why. It is a school and industry collaboration story. It is about how effective partnerships with industry can support schools to achieve their vision for teaching and learning. Prior to P2P, VAS had a lot of anecdotal data about flexible furniture and the positive impact it was having on their students' learning. However, they wanted some evidence, and so did BPATA, one of their furniture suppliers. This project, which is funded by BPATA but enacted with the spatial learning team at VAS School, is borrowing a repeated measures design from the health sciences to track students' engagement and teacher pedagogy as they move from flexible to traditional furniture arrangements and back again. In our design, all other variables are controlled, so we can be fairly certain that our furniture intervention is responsible for the differences. The school itself is comprised of modest buildings, including the historical school site, some brick construction and demountables. None of these buildings have been adapted in our study. It is just the furniture that has changed. The pedagogy has also remained the same. A year into our study, and we've found that 93% of students feel that the furniture impacts their learning, and they actively select furniture that meets their physical or learning needs. The students that we measured, which were across years 3 to 6, had resilient engagement in the first year of our study. One term of different furniture wasn't enough to make any statistical change to their engagement in learning, but it did make a statistically significant difference to teachers. Teachers had to work much harder to apply their inquiry-based model in the traditional spaces compared to the flexible. In effect, they carried the load of the inflexible furniture. We found that teacher pedagogies are more student-centred when they're working with flexible furniture, and they're more teacher-centred when there are traditional groups of desks and chairs installed in the room. Teachers also felt that they generally had more impact and found it easier to build relationships and trust with their students when they were working in the flexible arrangements. They found that they had to manage more relationship issues within the traditional furniture arrangement as a result of helping their students adapt to this setting and to students being more static in the learning environment and set in particular groups. The data that we're finding from this study are proving useful to BPATA in terms of furniture design. We used a process of photo elicitation where students took a photograph of where they preferred to work and annotated it with the reasons why. They did this repeatedly throughout the year, so we built a bank of the types of furniture most frequently chosen by students and the characteristics that students felt made the furniture most useful to them. We also have lots of comments from students about how they use the furniture, and some of these were really insightful, like the one that I have on the screen. We didn't realise that students actually use the space to aid their concentration. In particular, this student said that they had to turn their head to socialise with friends, and if they do that too much, their neck will hurt. And so they were encouraged to stay focusing on where the teacher was rather than socialising. That way, they didn't get distracted. This study is proving quite useful for BPATA because they're thinking about the implications of these data for their future furniture designs. And as they look to engage students in 21st century inquiry-based learning, such as the model used at VAS, they can use these student data to think about their own design process. The 2 case studies we've shared are just a couple of examples of how P2P research is informing both school and industry practice. While no 2 schools are the same, there are some consistent messages that come from the P2P program of work. First, schools were driven by the need to build evidence. They wanted to know more about what was happening in order to direct future ideas and strategies. However, they also realised that they needed specialist support. They need architects, interior designers, and researchers to help them build this evidence. Second, each of these examples is driven by relevancy. While there are some common solutions that certainly apply across schools, everything must be looked at through the lens of the school's unique structures, policies, and practices, and of course, the culture that's created by its students and its teachers. Finally, we've realised that teachers have a lot of experience and an instinct for how classrooms work physically, and this is built over years of good practice in these spaces. But with our current rethinking and increase of ILEs, teachers need support to realise the remarkable benefits that these spaces provide for their pedagogies, both in terms of how ILEs can add to their pedagogy, as well as how the spaces can give students greater agency in their learning. As a program, P2P has helped schools realise the importance of opening conversations around ILE design and practices within their schools. Schools have been really good at disseminating their processes and their findings to staff, parents, students, and industry collaborators as evidence of what works within their own school context. They've also been reporting to each other through workshops that we host twice a year, where they can share their learning as a consortium. In addition, we're working on a P2P book with Springer, which we hope to finalise early in 2022 to disseminate the findings of the program of work more broadly. If you'd like to know anything else about P2P or the projects that we have within the program, please don't hesitate to reach out or ask questions. Thank you.